Ed, thank you for joining me for another Tech Talk. We're getting some great traffic on these. People love them. And today we wanted to dive into everyone's favorite topic, which is COBRA benefit enrollment files. And I wanted to talk to you about it because I saw you on a call this week with a customer, and I thought it was just one of those great scenarios that we run into where, everyone, or a lot of people in HR, they know what COBRA is. You get terminated, you have an opportunity to stay on your existing benefits, but there's a process that has to get triggered to make all of that happen. And so on the surface, it presents itself as pretty straightforward. Take your terminated employees, send them over to your COBRA provider. What actually happens, Ed, in the real world? What makes this one of these deceptively tricky integrations to set up?
Yeah, so there is nothing easy about when it comes to HR data, but
Right.
it shouldn't technically be hard
Yep.
with a platform like Aragorn, right?
Yes.
So when you think about the idea behind Cobra, the underlying piece of it is qualifying events.
Okay.
And what constitute a qualifying event, right? Every company is different. But when you look at the definition itself, you have volunteer terminations, you have involuntary terminations, you even have reduction in hours that could trigger a COBRA eligibility. Maybe the key exception here is gross misconduct, where
Hmm.
an employee would generally be ineligible for receiving COBRA, right?
Yep.
So these are all events, but when you technically go into the HR system,
Hmm.
every termination reason is completely stored differently,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
So it's super easy to say, I show me all employees that have been terminated. But then once you start pulling the pieces apart of now, how do you find employees that are terminated because they voluntarily maybe resigned, and even when you talk about resignation can even fall into you have retirement, you can also have people going on leave and not coming back. So these are all events that are qualifying events that triggers Cobra.
Yep.
And even to make it more complicated when it comes to that, not only when the employee is triggered, but the employee's dependent can
Right.
also be eligible
Yeah.
for Cobra, right? Because
Yeah.
there are so many events that happens throughout the employee life cycle, right?
Right.
It
So your
could be
employee might just be cruising along, and then
correct.
maybe they go through a divorce, and then their dependents, you know, now
Exactly.
trigger an event. So, like, how do
Correct.
you find something like that?
Exactly. So those are all attribute
Yeah.
that exist within your HR data, right?
Mhm.
And with a platform like Aragorn, typically you would have to describe this rule set to a consultant. The
Right.
consultant translate that into code, hope he gets it right the first time. But these are all events that we capture.
Yeah.
And with the right set of configurations, HR leaders can literally go into Aragorn, find those events using a point and click, and pretty much configure it. So the way to think about this is you're describing a rule set of what eligibility looks like.
Mhm.
Then Aragorn does the hard work
Yep.
of using that and going to find the employees that meets those rules.
It's funny. It wasn't Cobra, but we were on a call about an hour ago, and there was a senior leader in HR, and she was in Aragorn just changing something. And I thought that was really striking because it is that situation where, um, like you've said over and over again, HR knows what needs to happen. But if you give them a platform where they can just make that rule set, it shouldn't matter whether there's a curly bracket and a tab or whatever in the file. The software should just take care of that.
Yeah, exactly, right. And most cases we do run into situations where IT may say, well, why can't HR function the way we've coded this
Yeah,
eligibility
which is
file?
backwards,
Which
right?
is pretty much backwards, right? You're trying to fit a very complex and a compliance driven workflows
Mhm.
into a coding building blocks, but HR data is not like that, right? To your
Yeah,
point, HR leaders really understand what needs to happen. They
right.
can pretty much describe to you the rules that governs a specific integrations like a COBRA file. But someone would have to pick that
Mhm.
and be meticulous about translating that into code to go
Yeah.
find those employees. And Aragon pretty much removes that
Yeah.
hassle and complexity.
That telephone game is so expensive if you think about it. Because also the call earlier this week where we were working through the COBRA test file, when we were working through with that customer, she was capturing scenarios on the fly. But if you think about a normal process without Aragorn, she would have to document that somewhere, sit down, get time with her partner in IT or her consultants, walk through it, explain to them what was going on. But you two were just shooting through it because you're like, oh, of course, gross misconduct would lead to this. This is how we'd filter them out. Let's go. Right. You were just doing the work as you thought of the work, which is, I think, the delightful thing about Aragorn.
Yeah, and that's how HR works, right?
Yes.
But traditionally, HR has been fit into a methodology that anytime requirements changes, HR feels as if they're building a whole new product from scratch.
Yes.
Right? You're going through requirements gathering.
Mhm.
It takes a couple of weeks. Then you
Mhm.
go find resources. You go through Q. You go through different iterations of the requirement, and it shouldn't be that. It should be a platform built specifically for HR teams. HR understands their data. They know their data. They know how their workflow works. With the right set of tools, they should be able to power through.